Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're talking about PlayStation stopping PC ports of their first-party games. Now, the multiplayer is still going to go, but we'll go through this report real quick. This is probably the shortest one that I had. Yeah, this just has most of the details. But yeah, a report from Bloomberg from Jason Scheier claims that PlayStation has internally decided to move away from launching first-party games on PC. The report cites weak sales of PlayStation 5 games on PC and also concerns about harming the PlayStation 5 brand. Now, what I do find curious about this is that the PlayStation 5 games were on PC storefronts, but they weren't selling with all of the other games available to them. So maybe PlayStation games aren't as sought after as some of us thought they were. And that is kind of surprising, but they still did make a good chunk of money, and I'm kind of surprised they're walking away from that maybe. But we'll get into that. Also, too, the next-gen Xbox, which was confirmed literally today, will essentially be a PC hybrid. So again, Xbox players would be able to circumvent the PlayStation 5 console and the majority of that ecosystem by just buying the software and their games for their Xbox. Also, the prospect of PlayStation games running on the Xbox probably isn't sitting well with Sony executives, and yeah, I would probably agree with that. The plans will not impact multiplayer games like Marathon or Marvel Token Fighting Souls, and this also, too, probably wouldn't affect things like Hunter's Gathering, right? We know that's also coming like to PC. We also know, too, that there were, quote, other platforms at the end of Neo 3, so I wonder if we're still going to get Neo 3 maybe. Well, we have heard that Ghost of Yotei was possibly scrapped from one of the insiders that Jason Scheier was talking to. PlayStation is also set to publish Death Stranding 2, which they no longer own the publishing rights for, so that makes sense. Kojima Productions wants to get as much money as they can. And also Kina, Scars of Cosmora, which is these guys right here. These are independent studio. This is an independent studio. They're not under the PlayStation publishing umbrella, but they're getting, publishing support. But we're going to talk about that too. And yeah, the studio's been around for a while, but it's based in California. And yeah, this is the game if you want to check it out. But honestly, I don't know. There's potential there. Just taking a quick little peek, I do think there's some potential there with an open world type of environment and combat. And anyway, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of something for me to take a look at. But the thing too that's kind of crazy is like Sony has also made need to clarify that, over $2.3 billion selling first party games on PC and Xbox. Now, I've seen some reports that roughly on PC is 1.5, 1.7 billion. That means the rest of the money is basically from Xbox, which would be 0.6 or 0.8 billion dollars. Which is nothing to sneeze at. And still, they also are making some first-party stuff for the Nintendo Switch. So again, the Switch 2. This is not just PC or Xbox. It's also the Switch as well. The Switch 2 as well in some cases. So yeah, just the short end of it. Sony has made 2.3 billion by selling their first party, and the new data with the new data that they just released. And I really wanted to take a look at this picture here. I know it's not the clearest, but this is the best that we have. But yeah, they're only taking a look at 2022. Well, we've had PlayStation games been going to Steam and other storefronts since 2020 with God of War. So we're still missing like roughly a year and a half, 2 years here, depending on the fiscal year of Sony PlayStation. And so yeah, they have made over $2.3 billion. And supposedly they're walking away from it. And I just think that's kind of weird. Now, Steam had massive sales on Helldivers. We know that's the biggest game. Helldivers was very big, and then also we know that Xbox has also done the same thing. Steam numbers are, I want to say it's 13 million copies sold, and then Xbox is 1.6 million copies sold so far. They've sold over 20 million copies in total, with roughly about 25-30% going to PlayStation. So yeah, I mean the majority of their biggest game has been sold somewhere else. And yeah, that is a multiplayer game, but also, as you can see, depending on the quarter, they are still selling millions of dollars. And the thing that I think is curious is that ports are not overly expensive. They're maybe $5-10 million to make a port. And so you don't really need a lot of money. You sell 100,000 or 200,000 copies of the game in that particular platform, and you can basically make all of your money back. Some ports are also cheaper than that, depending on the size of the team and whatever. But yeah, teams can generally be very small. They can also be outsourced to someone else in a cheaper region of the world. And then they also don't take as long. So it is drastically cheaper all around. And they're usually porting, usually not multiplayer games. So they don't have to worry about any of that integration either. They can just kind of make the game. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's very curious that they're doing this. And none of this, I have to say, is officially confirmed by Sony. This is all just from two people, Jason Schreier and Nate DeHate, that are saying that they've heard from insiders, and they're sharing that the insiders are saying this type of stuff. Now, we're not getting Ghosts of Yotei on PC, even though that's been in development. They're going to scrap that. Again, I wonder about Neo 3, and also that PlayStation is just not seeing the benefit. And if that's the case, it just shows that when their games are in an open market and not behind a paywalled garden, that people on Steam would rather just buy other games than the PlayStation stuff. And I think, again, that's kind of shocking to some of us. But I think too, some of their games really haven't been that great. And there's also been a lot of remasters as well over time. So yeah, if PlayStation actually does this, I don't know. I think it's kind of a mistake because yeah, $2.3 billion is kind of a mess. So something just feels off here, really. I'm trying to figure out exactly why they would do this because this seems to completely contradict everything that they've been doing and saying and pushing and everything. Now, it has been pointed out, which is an excellent point, that PlayStation has said that this was an experiment to see how it would go. And yeah, they've had roughly 6 years of doing this now, going on heading towards 7. So again, if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it, or maybe it's just not worth it. But I definitely think it is still profitable because, again, the ports don't cost very much. They can get them out pretty quickly within a year, maybe even less than that, take time to polish them, etc. And yeah, actually get them out the door. So some of the games that would be held back would be like Saros, Wolverine, Ghosts of Yotei, the God of War trilogy, Son of Sparta, Intergalactic, those type of games technically wouldn't be coming to PC if this is all real. This would also mean that any third-party game published by Sony would probably not be coming either. Because, again, even though some of these are not created by them or some of these are not published really by them anymore, they've gone independent, like Death Stranding 2 or MLB The Show. They don't own the publishing rights to those anymore. They still count them as first-party IP and also as first-party games. It's not entirely a full-picture argument for, true first-party titles. Other games that we are getting are multiplayer games, right? The first and the third-party games, which would be Hunter's Gathering, Fair Games, Marathon, which is already out, which is actually doing fairly well as of right now on the first day of launch, and then also Marvel's Token, Fighting Spirits, and any other kind of multiplayer game. And whether this is made by them as a first party or actually made by some other third-party studio, the multiplayers will be coming. So yeah, why make the change? Because again, if this is true, gaming in PC is not going according to plan, which I think that's very interesting. And, the money that they've made of that roughly $2.37 billion plus, because again, we're not going all the way back, it just shows that this includes the games, the DLCs, the microtransactions on PC, Xbox, and probably also likely Nintendo, which there's been a few there, like Lego Horizons. Okay, that's a great example of that. But yeah, leaving multiplayer games, their multiplayer games are probably making the majority of that $2.4 billion. But single player again is still cheap to make, and they're doing that. So yeah. Why the pullback? I mean, are they doing this in kind of preparation for the PlayStation 6? And this is kind of where it just becomes more of my thought process, just kind of a discussion. Because yeah, I'm really kind of curious because it just doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me. So I believe they're trying to double down on the PlayStation brand. That's what makes the most sense. We do know from the Insomniac hack, those leaks, that PlayStation does feel like their pillars have kind of aged, and that the younger generations or that players don't care as much about exclusives like they did. Some of us still do, of course. Okay, we hear about it online all the time, but again, that's not everybody. That's not necessarily reality. We do know too that they're seeing slowing console sales, and we also know too, a couple quarters ago, that they switched to monthly active users instead of just PlayStation console sales. Not that that's going away or anything, but when we take a look at VG charts, which is not perfect, but it's an estimate, this is roughly over the last 60, 61 months so far of the PlayStation 5 in blue and the PlayStation 4 in orange. And as we see, it's been pretty well on track, but the PlayStation 5 is lagging a little bit behind. We know, too, that right now they're at 92 million sales, and they just had their big push through the holiday, so I think they're a little above now the PlayStation 4. But again, are these actual sales to people or just sales to the retailers? Also, too, requiring the PC guys to log into PSN didn't really work. It really put a lot of people off from Helldivers, so that didn't necessarily work, but maybe they were kind of planning on a launcher, and that's probably not happening at this point, if all of this is true so far. And I think, too, again, the third-party Sony published games, well, I think, too, PCers are just willing to wait. I'm not really sure what the whole idea was going forward. This just kind of blows my mind, because the whole point of getting games over to Steam or putting it even stuff on Xbox like Helldivers was ultimately to make more money, right? Sony, for those of you that know and keep up with the channel, Sony has struggled to actually make good profit, and they continue to cut back on stuff, including right now they just completely ended their finance category or financial department. They're no longer doing that anymore. Again, it wasn't a ton of money, but hundreds of millions, or maybe around almost $1 billion, depending when you're looking at it. But yeah, they canned it. They got rid of that, so they're not doing that anymore. And then they're also changing how they're doing their TVs. They have a current partnership that they're working on with TCL, which is a Chinese company, to make their TVs cheaper. Because, again, I think they're also struggling with that. When we also look at their financials, we see that quite a few of their sectors weren't as profitable. And let me pull this up. So yeah, when we take a look at PlayStation, they've met their earnings, but they're getting closer and closer and closer to their actual prediction, and then that is a pretty big drop off there for their earnings. That is really low compared to what we would think it would be, and that's next quarter. Also, they're behind on their payout ratio for their dividends, which is a lot, over half, which is not good. And then again, their net profit has been 10%. Roughly the last 3 quarters. But then what the heck is this? Net income was negative $6.55 billion, and they still have net profit. I don't know exactly how all of that works. I'm not a business guy, but negative $6.5 billion, maybe that's part of what this shift is coming from and why they're getting away from PC and Xbox. Or there, of course, it could be multifaceted, kind of like I think it is accurately. But yeah, this negative income here is enough to actually wipe out the last 4 quarters, the last 12 months. So did they really make any profit at all if their net income is so negative? It says they did, but yeah, that's not necessarily a good thing. That's not something you really, really want to see. And then, yeah, their payout, again, is low and some other stuff. So things are not really great. Right now, Marathon is doing very good, and so they're, well, let's see. Let me just pull up a full chart here. So yeah, here we had the server slam. This was kind of going down, but then after it was over, mega crash right there in pre-market. That was horrible, with a couple of days in there, roughly, and that was like 9% total. Well, now we've had launch, and it's doing okay. It's kind of trending back up, but that's still pretty low compared to where it was. And again, when we take a look at PlayStation it's just been kind of really bad because they've never been able to recover from 2000. They've never been able to get up there, and they've gotten close. Okay, this was December of 21, and then November of 25, and they cannot get up there. So I think Sony is more sick than we think it is. And part of the reason of scaling back and trying to double down on their brand for PlayStation 5, I think ultimately is a good thing. But again, I just think it's weird that it's like their whole strategy was ultimately to make more money, and now they're pulling back on that. And I think the reality with a lot of people is that they don't care about exclusives as much anymore. And I also don't think people care about console as much anymore because it's not a closed market. More people are discovering PC, more people are playing on mobile, more people are playing on cloud, more people are just playing on what's available, and they're not necessarily too worried about a few games that they may not be able to play. Because when we're looking now at a disc PlayStation 5 is $550, we're looking at a slim digital, which is $500, and we're looking at a PlayStation 5 Pro, which is $750. It's expensive. Controllers are $75, $80. And then we're also looking at the games, which are generally $70. So it's not cheap, okay? It is expensive. And then the other thing, too, that I think is that if they're wanting to really rebuild their kind of whole exclusive tree, well, this is actually all of them. They have 23. I'm not even kidding. They only have 23 that are truly exclusive to PlayStation 5 that you can play right now or play shortly, okay? Like, we're going to recognize some of these. Code Violet came out. That was horrible. Astrobot, they won Game of the Year in 2024. We have Ghost of Yotei, right? That's going to technically stay exclusive, I guess, until it's not. And then, Sons of Sparta, the God of War trilogy remake, Intergalactic, which we're expecting in 2027. Wolverine is going to be this year. Project Windless, Quantum State, which is Quantum Error, Quantum State, whatever. Sorrows, which is coming very soon. And then the Silent Hill, the short message, and then Winds Rising. But that's the entire list. I'm really not kidding. Everything else is on another platform. And I really think they need to be careful here because Sony knows that the cost of the console is getting expensive. They're also wanting to put out the PlayStation 6, of course, but they're planning to continue to monetize the existing PlayStation 5 players to avoid raising console prices. They know that's just not good. They saw what happened with Xbox. They don't want to do that. Xbox saw like a 70% crash in their hardware, which is like the worst they've ever had. And that is absolutely brutal. But yeah, they want to minimize the impact of increasing memory costs to the segment going forward, so they're going to prioritize monetization of the installed base. So if you're already a PlayStation 5 user, they're going to find a way to try to get more money out of you. And yeah, they're going to focus on digital game sales, physical media, microtransactions, DLC, all of this other kind of stuff. But also, increasing things like PlayStation Plus. So it's not great. Again, they had 132 million. Again, I don't know if that's actually all PlayStation or PlayStation and other platforms. But yeah, just wanting to raise cost, find ways to continue to extract money out of you. People are not going to be overly excited about that. And the biggest problem that all of these companies are having, which I keep saying, is that they're struggling too with inflation. They're struggling too with getting the hardware to build their stuff and run their stuff. It costs money. If it costs you extra money to go buy a console or get a PC build, it also costs the companies more. Now, they get discounts, but again, those discounts go up. And we are continuing to see that roughly an estimate of an additional 130% increase to some hardware for gaming by the end of 2026, by the end of this year. And I mean, that's definitely another problem. I just think it's interesting, too, that PlayStation is maybe really feeling the pressure. It's ironic, because I feel like Sony is fighting for 4th place out of 5. Xbox is at the bottom. PlayStation is number 4. Nintendo's number 3. PC and handhelds is number 2. and then mobile's at the very top. And whether we really want to accept that or not, of what's a real console, what's a real platform, all of this kind of stuff, the fact of the matter is that younger generations are just playing somewhere else. And consoles are not selling like we would think. We know that they've stagnated for the last several years, the majority of the 2020s, and they'll probably continue to do that. And so, again, Xbox, Nintendo, and PlayStation, they're all just raising their prices because they have to. I think they understand that they don't want to necessarily, especially when they keep doing it. But yeah, the pullback of selling more games to more customers, even if it is, maybe only 450 or 500 million a year, it's still 500 million a year. And they could continue to grow that if they just released day and date. Part of the problem is that when the game is launched and released, it's like, well, the hype is already over. Why bother? And then, too, when you have stuff like this, where it's confirmed that the next-gen Xbox will play PC games, why is Sony worried about Xbox? It's a dead, dying, last-place console anyway. It's had bad marketing. It's had bad messaging. There's been a lot of stuff that has been shifted too quickly for the player base. They've also raised prices, but they're still worried about the worst player in the game, technically. Now, I still like Xbox. I have my reasons. But the biggest one is that that's where my friends are, and that's where my digital library is, right? But I also have a digital library on PC for Steam and GOG. So my next-gen Xbox is going to be able to play those libraries, and I'm still going to have access to Xbox, and that sounds really nice. With just a tentpole title of 1 or 2 games per year from Sony, that doesn't sound that great. Their next-gen PlayStation isn't going to be $500. It's going to be quite a bit more than that. I think it's at least going to be $700, $7 or $8, and then I think the next-gen Xbox is probably going to be $1,100. We'll see. And what's the Steam machine going to be? $900, $1,000, probably. $1,200, $1,300 for the other, the bigger hard drive. I don't know, but I mean, it's just not getting cheap. And there's going to be less people too that are going to buy multiple platforms. They're going to look at everything. They're going to see where their libraries are, and they're just going to focus on probably one primary platform. So they're not going to buy the PlayStation, the Xbox, the Nintendo Switch, the PC. They're just going to probably pick on 1 or 2. And because, yeah, it just costs too much, and it's not worth the cost. And, yeah, ultimately, this could be a mistake for Sony. I hope it's not, because I want them to be able to make and build good games. But, yeah, again, I just can't get over that nobody's talking about this, that the PC games are available, and if they're going to pull them because nobody's buying them, that means that their games in an open market on PC, nobody really wants them. But yeah, still they're cutting out potential buyers. They're saying no to several $1 billion over the long haul, and I just feel like it's short-sighted, really. They're also, pushing, also third-party publishing could ultimately dry up. Again, Kojima Productions with Death Stranding, well, they own the rights now, and they're going to put their game wherever they can to sell it. Also, MLB The Show, roughly the same story. Also, Square Enix, Capcom, Arrowhead, which makes Helldivers, Shift Up, which makes Stellar Blade. They've all said that they're not going to do exclusive deals with PlayStation anymore. They're going to be self-published or get maybe some funding from somewhere else and not do an exclusive deal with PlayStation. They don't want the control, the restrictions from Sony. They just want to be able to do what they want to do with what's best for the company. And that makes total sense, and that's not going with PlayStation. And if PlayStation continues to say, your first and third-party deal games are going to be just exclusive to PlayStation, I don't think everybody's going to go for that. I think they're going to say no. They're already saying no, and I think more of them will continue to say that if they do it this way. So that's dangerous for PlayStation. Also, we know that Pearl Abyss, that's making Crimson Desert. PlayStation, again, went to them, and Pearl Abyss was like, no. We are going to put our game everywhere. We're not accepting money from you. We're going to do what we want. And again, I think more companies are going to continue to do this because, again, day one for everybody just makes more money. It just makes more money. The data proves that. So yeah, Sony keeps reaching out to dev studios and they're being rejected more and more often. And that's got to sting a little bit because PlayStation can't get their games out fast enough for a really good cadence of several games a year. And so they're relying on third-party stuff to kind of fill in the gaps. But again, if your whole platform is exclusives and your third-party partners are saying, nope, we're not doing it next time, we're putting our stuff everywhere, well then people are less incentivized to go out and buy your console because you have less stuff coming. And maybe that's also why they're partly maybe going to pull back. Again, none of this is confirmed from Sony, but it's just an interesting thought experiment. I also think, too, what happens to Nexus. They just closed down Blue Point, and Nexus is a PC port studio. So if they pull back, they're going to have less work. So are they going to shrink the studio? Are they eventually going to get rid of them or just contract it out or have some other studio figured out? Sony has plenty of studios. But yeah, that makes me wonder about Nexus. I hope nothing happens to them. The whole thing is just kind of wild. And then I ultimately, too, need to go to what the executives have already said. When we go back to the fireside chat, which I've tried finding, but I haven't been able to find it. That's been really frustrating. But the fireside chat, they said something to the tune of that, yeah, going off console with first-party IP. And, I mean, that was, what, a year ago? And they're undoing that already? That's a quick shift. Also, they had a multi-platform director wanting to get games on PC and Xbox. That was in the job description. And they probably hired somebody for that. And is that just, I don't know, going to be a smaller department now than we thought? Also, the leadership wants to continue on increasing the revenue again on PlayStation users. And then, yeah, they only have a few true exclusives. So, I don't know. None of this really fits. Like, that's what's bothering me. None of this really all fits together. Because to do a total U-turn on this, to say no to future revenue, to try to expand on old pillars that they've already said are old and dated, it does not make sense. And then Sony hasn't said anything. It did say in the Bloomberg report that Sony declined to comment or didn't comment or whatever. So, I don't know. Jason Schreier, he's usually right about a lot of stuff. A lot of people like him, myself included, right? But it's still not confirmed, and this one just doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't make any sense at all. But again, okay, if Wolverine, Saros, all of these other games are ultimately going to just stay on PlayStation and not go anywhere else, I'm just not going to play them. That's my reality. Why would I when I have hundreds of thousands or even millions of games on Steam and GOG and Epic Game Store, plus my own Xbox? And I don't have to pay for my backwards compatibility list. Some of the original Xbox, quite a few of the 360, and all of the Xbox One and Series X games are going to be there on the next gen. That's thousands of games. That's like over 6,000 games. So I'm not going to be hurting saying no to, 10 games at PlayStation. I'm really not. And there's already quite a few games that I can already buy that are PlayStation funded. And then again, there's more third parties that are saying, no, we're not doing exclusive deals, or they're timed. I don't know. I'm not sure how I know this video is going long, but I'm just not really sure how they do this, how they work around this. I don't know. Something just feels off to me, personally. And yeah, maybe they do it. And honestly, good luck to them. I personally don't think it's a good choice. Because again, if you were making $100,000 and you were told that you were now going to be making $95,000, $5,000 less, would you be happy about that? Oh, but it's only $5,000. Well, We all know the answer to that question. So anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in. Various content every single week. Like, sub, all that jazz. Keep the vid in the algo if I've earned it. But yeah, this is just a weird one. I'm not sure what to make of this. And then same too with Xbox. Possibly going back to exclusives. Not confirmed, but possibly doing exclusives again. Man, again, I said, why? Why? It's less money. I don't get it. I don't get it. Companies are to make money. They're supposed to show growth, and you can't do that when you're decreasing the amount of people that can buy your product. It just doesn't make sense. So with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one.